So our 2025 harvest update, talked to three people again, Giese, Dylan Erickson, and Karl Guetter.
We hit a turning point in June, and June and July was extremely wet, upwards of 40-plus inches of rain.
The warm weather really sped up the beans once they got, close to maturity.
The ethanol industry is experiencing good margins. Demand is very good going to ethanol.
Well, welcome to the Water Table Podcast. I'm recording on October 23rd, and this is a fun episode. We've done this in the past years, but it's a harvest check-in. This is going to post on October 28th, so not very long after we're recording this, we're gonna be posting it. So it's fairly close to live information. I'm going to be calling a few friends from around the area, Minnesota and Iowa in particular, and just talk about how harvest has gone for them, how the yields have been, and I think we're going to find out some different things. I know in the area here where Prinsco is headquartered around Wilmer, Minnesota, we've just had an extraordinary amount of rain this summer, and the yields are in this small pocket not very good. But as you get south a little ways and south of Highway 212 in Minnesota, things get much better. And so we're gonna make some calls. We're gonna talk to some people, and I'm gonna start first here by calling Giese from Northwest Iowa. So look forward to that call.
Hey, Jamie.
Hi, Al. How are you today?
I'm good, and you?
I'm great. I got you here on the Water Table Podcast, and glad you could join me. Giese is a farmer in Northwest Iowa. Al, why don't you tell us a little bit about your operation and where you're located?
Okay, we farm mostly in O'Brien County, one tier of counties down from Minnesota, and one county over from the South Dakota border, bordered by Sioux County there. We run a couple thousand acres of corn and soybeans and some alfalfa, and cattle feedlot and cow-calf.
Sure.
And I also own a feed and trucking business. We market we market a lot of the co-product feeds out of the ethanol plants to the beef industry.
Great. Al, it's been, we've gone into this down cycle in commodity prices the last few years now, and feels like we might be at the bottom. That's not my expertise, but I know it's kind of just bounced in a bottom here and hasn't changed a whole lot the last 60 days or so. I don't know. You've got a little gray hair. Let's just admit it. So I don't know if you have any. I don't know if you have any thoughts on, is 2025 kind of the bottom of this cycle? What do you think we're going to see next year? And then after that, we'll talk a little bit about, how your fall was.
Yeah, Jamie, I think you're essentially have line of sight on that. Yields were excellent in this area, good to excellent, but variable. And the ethanol industry is experiencing good margins. Demand is very good going to ethanol. The corn crop was good, but probably not quite as good overall as was expected. Ethanol demand is good. That helps corn demand a lot. The livestock sector's doing good on corn. So I think we are at the bottom. On beans, who knows with the turmoil from the trade situation with tariffs and the China market, and that's just going to have to play out. I would be much more optimistic on corn than I am on soybeans at this time.
Sure. So when you talk about corn and, being at the bottom and margins being, razor thin for a lot of guys, yields are kind of the king at that point, right? And so what happened in your general area, not only with your farm, but what you're hearing from others in Northwest Iowa?
Yeah, of course, I talk to a lot of people on the beef side and have good contacts with local people, but on yields. Yields were good. Were very good to excellent in this area. A couple exceptions. We had a derecho level winds go through in July. That it wasn't a wide strip, but it a lot of green snap and tangled corn, and that reduced yields in those areas. We had some hail in late September, where again a fairly narrow strip, but it impacted bean yields pretty significantly. But overall, good growing season. I would say the average corn yield probably a record 220 to 260, I think, and even some better than that on corn. A lot of the beans were in the 65 to 70 bushel range, but also some fields in the 75 to 80 bushel range. In terms of our farms, the best crop we've ever raised. So generally very good yields, lots of corn, lots of soybeans. But like is always the case, some pre-marketing probably would have been a good idea. And I hear lots of talk that not enough of that took place.
Yeah, yeah. So when you're talking about, those types of yields, I'm curious if you have a line of sight throughout the state of Iowa. Was that typical across the state, or did Northwest Iowa more lead the charge as far as higher yields this year? Did you have any line of sight on that?
I think that's a good question. And you get south of Highway 20, we weren't as impacted by the diseases up here, particularly southern rust. You get south of Highway 20, they were impacted a whole lot more. What I'm hearing from farmer friends down that way, Fort Dodge, Des Moines area, southwest Iowa, is the southern rust probably took 20 to 30 bushel off their expected yields. The corn died off early. It impacted test weight, and it impacted yield. Overall, you might be able to make a case that at this point USDA has overall national yields overprojected some. Mm-hmm. It'll take a while for that to correct, but I think Northwest Iowa was probably the sweet spot in Iowa this year, although there were some good yields in eastern Iowa as well. Again, south of Highway 20, a lot of disease impact, and boy, this was a year, if you didn't spray fungicide, you paid a pretty heavy price for it on corn.
Yeah, and another thing to mention there is you guys in Northwest Iowa have had some challenging growing seasons in a row here. I don't know how many that's been, but you've had some pretty dry seasons. And then I think it was last summer that, just some significant, rains and flooding in a lot of that area early in June that did affect, the long-term outlook for that growing season. And so you mentioned that early on that you just had a really good, consistent growing season, which then produced a great yield. But how many of those do you remember in a row were a little bit subpar for you guys, for your area?
The previous two last year, you're right. We had extremely wet early, and then extremely dry in August and September, and that it was a decent crop, but it wasn't great. This year, if you were not in the path of the derecho winds or that late September hail, this is about as good a growing season as you're going to get in Northwest Iowa. Yeah. And if you sprayed fungicide, you avoided. We didn't have near the disease impact up here that, again, central and southern Iowa had. That southern rust just didn't get this far north as much.
Yeah, great. So I mentioned early in the podcast before I called you, Al, that we're recording this on October 23, 2025 to be released on the 28th of this month. But where are you at in your harvest? Are you finished? And what does the countryside look like in Northwest Iowa right now here at the end of October?
Yeah, we finished Tuesday. I would say by the end of the week, you're right in this general area, not much corn going to be left. I went to Sioux Falls yesterday for a meeting with Poet, and there's a little more corn in the field as you go west. but generally harvest is getting wrapped up down here.
Yeah, we, as a businessman that manufactures plastic pipe for water management in the farms, we really like that when the farmer gets some time after harvest to finish up, clean up the equipment, and then still want something to do before freeze up. So, because usually that means they want to go out and do a little tiling.
Exactly. I went over to one of my farms right prior to this discussion, and I saw 2 tilers getting set up in fields, and my tiler was getting set up over at my feedlot farm. And you'll be pleased to know that there was quite a bit of Prinsco tile sitting there.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the plug here today, but no discounts, Al. No discounts.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. No, we really appreciate you joining us today on the Water Table. We're doing a little round the world of the Midwest agriculture and see how yields were. So you're our first call. Thank you for that. And we're going to keep moving here, and we're going to call Dylan Erickson out in western Minnesota next. So, Al, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. My pleasure.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Great conversation there with Al Giese in northwest Iowa, and sounds like they had a really great fall harvest as they're ready completed and really good yield. So I'm going to make a call to Dylan Erickson. He farms out western Minnesota in a town called Lewisburg, very small town. So to give people a little bit more perspective on where that is, it would be north and west of Montevideo, Minnesota. And let's call Dylan now.
Hello.
Dylan, Jamie Dunnick with the Water Table. How you doing today?
Hey, Jamie. It's nice to see you. I'm doing well. Sitting in the combine.
Awesome. Well, I've got you on the podcast as we speak here. So if you've got a couple of minutes, and I don't know if you're talented enough to run that combine and talk to me at the same time, but why don't we try?
I can sure try. I'll give it a whirl. That's for sure.
All right. Well, I noticed before we get going, I noticed it took you about 4 rings to answer the phone. And before you got engaged, you always answered on the first or second ring. So is there a correlation there? Or?
It could be a little bit. Actually, I was scrambling to get a AirPod in my ear as I was going around some trees. I kind of lost track of time. So that's what I'm using for an excuse this morning. But
all right.
No, things are good.
All right. Good. Well, we're doing something, and I've had you on before to do a harvest check-in, and it's kind of a fun thing that we do here on the Water Table in the fall. And I just spoke with a farmer named Al Giese in northwest Iowa, and just heard about their harvest. He just finished on Tuesday, some great yields, but I know things are a little different out there in western Minnesota, and so and haven't really talked to you since right when you were starting harvest. So kind of curious to get an update on how things are going, what kind of progress you're making, and what yields are looking not only like for you, but what you're hearing in your area.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone's rolling pretty heavy here in corn now. I would think by the weekend, we got a few nice days here yet, but by the weekend, I would sure think a lot of guys would be getting close to wrapping up if they're not already doing so. I know, like personally for our farm, we got a couple good days, and hopefully we can wrap that up and move on to some tillage and things like that. But overall, going into the year, spring, how wet it turned, great planting conditions, and then all of a sudden we hit a turning point in June, and June, July was extremely wet. Upwards of 40 plus inches of rain, and kind of continued into September, even into early September. So thinking, field conditions might be a little dicey, and just a little more of a struggle that way. But boy, we got a nice stretch there in the end of September into October here of some beautiful weather and beautiful days that these fields really shaped up and whatnot. But along with some of those events we had with all the rain, there were some hail events and some wind events too. So I know talking as selling seed too as well, so talking with some of my customers, some of those hail events maybe did a little bit more damage than what we kind of initially thought on some of those events. So again, you kind of get of Lock Park Lake, as I'll talk, if you get west of the lake, I know yields were down there. That's 200, 220 bushel corn environments, pretty typical, pretty regularly. And I know a lot of farmers in that area are struggling to find 100 and 150, 160 bushel corn. A lot of farm averages might get to that 170, 175. So definitely, I would say below average. But where I'm at now, east of the lake there, in Chippewa County, we're definitely seeing better yields over here. I would say 10 to 15 probably. It kind of seems extreme, but less inches of rain too, which is still is plenty. But we're seeing a really nice yield bump over here. Most guys I've talked to, everything's at least 200, and some of these good farms and well-drained farms with tile that can keep it away. You're seeing 230, 240 corn up and down the field. So again, pretty variable. Within a 20-mile stretch there that I kind of see a lot of, and but yeah, definitely excess moisture was kind of the key throughout the growing season as you get far enough west into Lock Park County and some of those areas.
Yeah, and I did mention before, as I set this up before I called you, that you farm out by Lewisburg, but you also farm straight east of Lewisburg, about 25 miles is what you're talking about now. And
Correct.
So that's kind of interesting, the variability of that, just really because of those rain events and the hail changes that much just in your small area.
Yeah, it's crazy how much it can change because, we stayed, south of like Ortonville, kind of that area where they had some really, really 8 to 10 inch rains. We kind of got the 5, 6 inch rains at a time, but you go, even 3-4 miles farther south of me, and then it really drops off. They did, when we got the 5 and 6 inch rains, they got the 2s and the 3s, and you can really tell the difference. So I have some customers that, kind of moved north a little bit with some of their stuff, and they just really couldn't believe, the variability and the difference. And I'm like, yeah, we got just that much rain, but yet we are still just south enough where, you get too far north of us. I know things even drop off a little worse in some stretches there. But you get south of Madison and into Dawson and towards Marshall, I know I get down that way, are some pretty impressive yields. We actually have a couple customers that are down in the Marshall Tracy area, and they were talking, neighboring farmers, a lot of their stuff, 250, 260 corn, 270 corn for farm averages. So again, it's very variable. What kind of pockets got what, but I would say in general, if you got the right rains this year and we got enough of it, things are looking pretty good. But there are some stretches in here where, the 160, 70 bushel corn is kind of the average and kind of the top end.
Yeah. And we're seeing that too as you get, closer to the east end of Chippewa County in that Clare City, Raymond area.
Sure.
Way in the western end of Kenai County, it's not very good compared to averages just because of those rains hit really heavy there again. So what about your soybean crop? What'd that look like?
Yeah, soybeans again, kind of all over the board. I would say some of the more, marginal, maybe high pH grounds, a little bit hotter ground, actually survived pretty well this year with as much moisture as we had, and especially where there was a pipe in the ground as well. So I would say some of the marginal ground for beans as you go east of Chippewa County, where things can get a little bit hotter for them. Actually 50 to 55 bushel soybeans, which, on maybe more of a typical year, a little bit drier year, with the IDC shows up and some of those other symptoms show up, 40, 45 bushel soybeans is kind of an average. So I would say a lot of guys are probably pretty happy with their soybeans, especially on some of the marginal ground. Maybe some of your top end stuff didn't quite reach where it was with some disease setting in, whether it was white mold or we had quite a bit of sudden death syndrome kind of in our area pop up too. And but then you get, like I said, you get across the lake east, again, pretty good bean country, 60s is a pretty good average there. It can even push to 70 in areas, and a lot of 50 to 55 bushel soybeans around there too. So again, kind of depends where you're at a little bit, but I would say a very, very average crop as I would spread across this, just the 25 miles. I really see a lot of, and customers have told me so.
Sure. Well, you get, moving on to, you got a couple of days left, so stay safe combining out there. But this is still pretty early for finishing. I think last year you probably finished right around now or maybe a day or two before you're going to this year. But overall, this is kind of an early finish, isn't it?
Yeah, especially the way, like I was talking earlier, the way the year was kind of leading up to fall. I was thinking, as far as selling seed goes, I think our first discount is, that first week in November. I'm like, there's gonna be a lot of guys still in the, combining. If it's going to be a slower process with, trying to find places to put trucks and things like that, and if it's going to be a really wet, and drying a bunch of corn, and we're, this year actually, with that 3 weeks we had, 4 weeks we had, corn really dried down, things really shaped up, and all of a sudden it was here, and all of a sudden, every day goes by, it was a lot of acres were getting taken out in a hurry. And like I said, a lot of the corn has been, from what I've been hearing, is 15 to 17%, maybe some of that late stuff or some of the maybe more drowned out droughty areas, we're still in that 18% or so, but not a lot of heavy drying and things like that. So that was actually a local elevator, and we had a little rally there in the market. And right after we got some of those rains, maybe a week ago, and the guy said 250,000 bushels got sold right across the scale. So that just kind of tells you, when you're drying the corn, if they're taking it down to 15%, if you are selling it right away versus, maybe a 14%. So guys were just selling it as they were going across the scale. So again, you could just really see how things shaped up so nice for us out in the fields as well. And then even the elevator was kind of seeing that impact as well.
Yeah, it really is remarkable, and it kind of happened to us in your area and here in the Walmer area the last 2 years in a row. Yeah. Like we went into September thinking, man, it's wet, and then had some just almost perfect weather with some heat and sunshine and wind throughout kind of the whole month to just set it up of September to set it up perfect for harvest. So pretty blessed that way, and we'll see what. It's one good thing about farming. We'll see what next year brings. But
it's one thing I've learned too in my young career is, every year has already been different in some way, some shape, form, however it's been. But yeah, I would have taken a little more heat, in later June and July, but and even August. But we again made up for it here in towards the back half of September and early October to kind of finish these things off in the right way. And yeah, can't not complaining that way for sure.
Yeah. Yep. Well, Dylan, stay safe. Thanks for the time here on the water table today, and have a great rest of the fall.
Yes, appreciate it, Jamie. Thanks for reaching out.
Thank you. All right, so that was Dylan Erickson out in western Minnesota. Like I said, he farms at Lewisburg, Minnesota, and also near Milan, Minnesota, which is north of, one of those is northwest of Montevideo. The other one is straight north of Montevideo. So good young guy out there representing the American farmer, trying to make it work and doing a great job. So thanks, Dylan, for that. My last call here for this harvest check-in is going to be to Karl Guetter. Karl is Prinsco agricultural segment lead, knows a lot about what we do here at Prinsco with managing water on the farm, but also he has his own farm. I grew up on the farm and farms with his brother, Adam. We'll get Karl on the line and see how it's going in Wabasso, Minnesota, which is south central Minnesota, south of Redwood Falls. Or for those that still don't know where that is, it would be east of Marshall, Minnesota. So let's see if we can get Karl here today.
Hey.
Hi, Karl. Jamie Dunnick here. I got you on the water table live. Well, we're actually not live, but we're recording today, and we're going to release on the October 28th. You got a little time to chat about the year so far and the harvest?
I do. It's going to be a little noisy here for another few seconds, but
that's just fine. That's part of what we're doing, is calling people in action. So if you're working, that's what all of these calls are about and what we've been doing today. So you're my last call. I talked to Al Giese down in northwest Iowa, got a report from there. I talked to Dylan Erickson out in way western Minnesota, and I kind of set this up before I called you of where you're located there in Wabasso. But wanted to call you, and I have touched base, numerous times per week throughout this growing season in regards to the growing season and how wet it was, and how that was going to impact the farmer in general this fall, commodity prices, and then, our business at Prinsco too, just because of were we going to get, or was the farmer going to get in the field at a normal time? And it's been kind of remarkable what's happened. So thought I would just, set this up that way and let you kind of share where you're at in the process of your fall harvest, what things look like, how that started and how it's going to end. So have at her.
Sure, no problem. Well, as far as from a timing standpoint, I really thought this was going to be a later one as well. But we had some really nice drying conditions, especially about 3-4 weeks ago when we started bean harvest. So things have gone actually really remarkably well since then. The warm weather really sped up the beans once they got close to maturity, and we had some really nice hot, dry days during bean harvest. You get out in the mornings early and get going. So bean harvest is all wrapped up. We're in corn now, obviously. Probably only about a day and a half of corn left. So all in all, we're about a week behind last year. And last year was, one of our earliest fall finishes ever. We're about exactly a week behind last year. Probably finishing up here tomorrow afternoon at some point, or maybe Saturday. So all in all, it's gone really well. From a water standpoint, from a wetness, there's definitely some scars out there in the fields due to the amount of rain we had. We see them every year, right? Your tile ground always does better, and that's a given. But they're out there again this year. I think most farmers, at least in Southwest Minnesota, are pretty pleased with their yields. Some are maybe a little disappointed that they weren't what they thought they were going to be, but they're still pretty good in most areas. There's uniqueness to every territory, and there's some spots where guys really got hit hard with different things. But all in all, I think guys are pretty pleased with the bushels that are out there. Disease crept in late in the year in corn and soybeans, whether you're sudden death and white mold in soybeans and some rust in the corn and things that took the top off for a few guys. But man, it's a pretty darn good harvest.
Yeah. I think, you and I talking offline just around what we're hearing, both from you and from, that area was, well into the, 220s to 240s was not uncommon on corn. And then, your soybean crop was better, quite a bit better there than it was if you go 20 miles north of you, in the pretty consistent in the low 60s, right? I think is what you had shared with me. So, and I'd heard, mid 60s in some of the areas just to the east of you. So, that's given where we were throughout, conversations in June, July, and August. I think not only is that surprising, but also that you're going to finish up harvest here in the next couple of days, before a whole week before November 1st. So, that's got to be rewarding and surprising both. So, one thing I wanted to just visit about a little bit, like I said, you're the last call I'm doing here on this harvest update, but is just for our listeners that aren't quite as connected to agriculture as you or I are, but what happens here in rural America in the agriculture and corn belt, starting late September through October, in regards to how much activity happens and what happens with a harvest. And just to have a conversation about that, I think it's kind of fun because we still, we're pretty close to it, and we still talk about it with a sense of awe, like how much gets done in that amount of time. And so, if you could just share your perspective a little bit on that.
Yeah, my perspective, when you're young, you just assume that, you just kind of work, right? And everyone is working, and you don't really notice a lot of things that are going on around you necessarily. But as you get older, the harvest phenomenon, you go from Fargo and North Dakota all the way down into Indiana, wherever you want to go to the southeast, the amount of work that gets done is astonishing, right? And it is really cool for me. I mean, I live in a town of Bullbass. We have 700 people. So you know everybody, and probably a few that are from the surrounding communities. And literally, it's all hands on deck, right? I mean, it's everybody that can drive a truck is driving a truck, right? If they're not helping a farmer out, they're helping a tiling contractor out, or they're helping the co-op out spreading fertilizer. I mean, the guy that owns the liquor store in town goes and drives semi at night for a farmer, to help move grain, and it's everybody's out and about. There's all kinds of trucks. You're seeing all these people at the grain elevators or at the co-op, and it's everyone's in, for the most part, a pretty good mood, and there's just a real sense of community around all the people that are involved in ag, right? And my wife teaches preschool, and it's kind of funny. These little boys are only 4 and 5 years old, and she would tell me the other night, every day when they come to preschool in the morning, all the little boys getting around a little circle, and they start talking about, are you guys done with corn yet? Are you guys done with corn yet? Oh yeah, we got 300 acres left. I mean, it's all the way from preschoolers all the way up to 85 years old.
Yep.
It's just fun.
Yep, for sure. And I think just the fact that it's done from the standpoint of the rest of the world, or the rest of even Minnesota, you go to Marshall from you is 25 miles, 30 miles, or Redwood Falls the other direction, same amount. And most of the people that live there don't even recognize or realize, not in a bad way, that's just not their world, but that how much is being done, that's feeding the world, but that is also driving, the economy of America and the world. It's just remarkable in a very short period of time of it getting planted, and then but especially the harvest is the real crown jewel on that, and is really cool.
Yeah, they're not necessarily connected, and certainly some don't know. I mean, some have no idea, right? And but I am surprised during this time of the year, even our friends in Marshall, or our acquaintances that I have, even in the cities, right? When they call this time of year, they're like, hey, how's harvest going? So, I mean, there's a lot of people that may not be connected anymore that still have a little bit in the back of their mind, right? They remember going out and seeing their grandpa harvest, or the case may be. And so there's still a passion, I think, in at least a fair chunk, especially of course, in Minnesota and these agricultural states. There's still a passion way back in the back that people are still feel some kind of connection to agriculture.
Yep, for sure. So, I just appreciate you joining me today. You got basically, like you said, a day, maybe 2 left, but stay safe. It's always, as you get this far into the harvest, get excited about being done, and you have been working long hours. So keep the crew safe and finish up strong, and look forward to visiting more about this next week.
Sounds good. I'm getting back on the road. Take care.
Thanks, Karl. Bye-bye. So our 2025 harvest update, talked to 3 people again, Giese, Dylan Erickson, and Karl Guetter. We also have, those were in Minnesota and Iowa. It doesn't mean we aren't hearing yields from North Dakota, South Dakota, Illinois, Indiana. And it's been a great harvest season. It's coming along really fast. There still is a fair amount of crop in North Dakota and northern Minnesota, as they've had more rain, but we still have a bunch of time here too. So excited to do these and to hear from the field and hear from people that are on the ground and are passionate about what they're doing. So thanks for joining us today on the Water Table.